going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, things are a little bit different today. I'm not as made up as I typically am. Hello? Can you see him? Did you get spooked, Karama? Did you get spooked, Karama? Oh, bud. Oh, hello. Oh. So as you can see, ow! So as you can see, ow! We have a new addition to the family. This is Karama. He made his presence known. No biting. Down, buddy. I know, you heard me talking about you. Come on, guys. Let's oh. Scoot, get out. You guys, they'll be fine for a few minutes. They'll be fine. They won't destroy anything, hopefully, in the time it takes me to finish filming this. But anyway, as you can see, I've been adjusting to a little bit of a life change over the past couple of weeks. They are literally ramming into my door right now, but we're gonna keep it quick, okay? And as a result, I just haven't had the time nor much inclination to work on doll projects these past couple weeks. So instead, I thought I would do a couple of smaller projects that would help clear up this mess that I have in the corner of my office. I have like just a big pile of stuff that I need to live elsewhere. And doing these projects will help move some of that stuff into a better location because they will no longer be unfinished, they will be finished. So come along with me as I finish up some projects that are laying around my office. Let's hop right into it. So for our first project, as you can see, I originally introduced it in real time, but I just talked for way too long. So long story short, I'm turning this shirt that I find kind of unflattering and uncomfortable into what I think is a cute, sort of fairy, Y2K-ish inspired two-piece. And to get started, I slid the shirt down and found that the neck hole actually fit around my waist. And I'm just cutting off the sleeves to sort of get started on turning this shirt into a skirt. Once I got the bulk of the sleeves cut off, I went ahead and pinned the armhole shut just to make sure everything fit correctly around my body. And I did have the thought, oh, maybe I can turn these holes into pockets. And then I had a second thought, which was, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't want to do that. After everything was pinned, I took the skirt off and then traced a line where the pins were and then took them out and repinned them in place to make sure everything laid flat. Once I had that all sorted out, I went ahead and sewed up the side with a gather stitch first so that I can pull it, and I think it's called ruching, ruche the side so that it has this little scrunchy look. And once I had all scrunched up how I liked it, I did go back over and do a normal stitch over it just to make sure everything held in place. And then I just went ahead and trimmed off the excess fabric before repeating these steps on the other side. Here's what it looked like with the sides all sewn up, and the next thing I needed to do was mark where I wanted the length of the skirt to fall because this thing was way too long and I need some fabric to make the top. And then you can probably guess what I did next. I cut it at the line and this was the length that I was left with. With the skirt squared away, the next thing to do was to figure out the top. And I decided to actually keep the sleeves and have a detached sleeve moment, kind of like I do with my dolls. And then I just figured out the fit that I needed to, have the top fit around my torso, and then I pinned it in place. So this next step is a little bit unnecessary, but I thought that I wanted the sleeves to be different than how they ended up. But I went ahead and sewed these elastic loops and then like sewed one end of the sleeve around the loops to create this end. Originally, this part was supposed to go around my bicep and hold it in place, but it ended up too tight, so I just like flipped the sleeves around the other way. So just ignore these steps. It's whatever. Basically, I could have just hemmed this end without the elastic in there, and it would have looked exactly the same. Next, I sewed together the main torso portion of the top and then cut off the excess once I was done. Next, I decided that I didn't want the top to just be a tube top, so I'm cutting out these strips of the remaining leftover fabric, and I'm going to be turning these into straps. Because they weren't long enough, I'm sewing together 2 strips to make one longer strip. Once I got my one long strip, I'm folding it over with the right side in and essentially sewing one very long tube. Which, yes, was a little difficult to do by hand, but I'm afraid of my sewing machine. I literally own a sewing machine, but I never use it because the last time I did, it got like a little janky. And so now I just kind of do everything by hand. And you know what? I'll say that it's for inspirational purposes. You know, you don't need to own a sewing machine to do DIY projects. Just need a little bit of time, put on a movie, and sew some stuff by hand. You know, a needle and thread are fairly inexpensive things to come by. So don't let your lack of machinery hold you back. And while I'm being inspirational, I was fighting for my life to get this tube turned right side out. This was probably even more agonizing than sewing everything. And I know I'm saying it's agonizing, but don't let the pain and agony stop you from doing DIY projects, okay? That's part of the fun. You know, it's good for the human spirit. After I got my tube sewed up, I went and I sort of figured out where I wanted the straps to be off camera, and I'm just sewing those bad boys in place. And because the top of the shirt sort of like rolls down, I'm sort of hiding my seam underneath that little like rolled lip at the top of the shirt. With the straps sewn on, this is how the set turned out and what it looks like on. I think it came out really cute. I'm kind of hoping that as I wash it, the bottom hem will sort of get distressed the way that like the bottom hem of the shirt is so that it matches. And I'm excited to have something in my wardrobe that is like bright and colorful, you know, because I have these 2 purses that I think are kind of fun with it. And, you know, I'm trying to branch out. You know, I have a very kind of goth closet, and sometimes I want to do something different. So now I have this for when I'm feeling a little different. Though I do think I need some like shoes and accessories to like bring the whole thing together, but that'll come with time. So for our next project, I'm going to be transforming this old, very old art set full of stuff that I'm never going to use into something hopefully a little cooler. I don't know if you could tell, but it was very heavy and I was struggling very much in this clip. The first order of business was to find enough space on my desk to get this opened up enough so that I could use a knife to pry these like plastic little holder things, the little plastic bits holding all the art supplies together. I need to get those out of there. Once the inside was gutted, I turned my attention to the outside and pried off this little bit of duct tape and then sort of wiped everything down with some disinfectant spray to get all the years of gunk and grime off the outside of this thing. So originally, I started working on the inside of the box. I was lint rolling these old pant legs because I was going to cut them down and use them as like a liner for like the inner parts of the box. But here's the thing. This video was taking me so long and I was just fighting for my life to get the inside done. And so what I did was I gave up. I factually gave up. I'm probably just going to buy some red felt and worry about doing the internal lining later, but I figured it'd be more interesting to see the more like fun decorative elements that I'm going to do on the outside. So let's just get into that. So for the outside of the box, I prepped it by first just taking some sandpaper and roughing up the external surface so that the next things that I'm going to do will actually stick. For this project, I want to do something a little bit different. I could have just went straight in and painted right on the surface of the box, but I really want to try doing this like sort of decoupage thing. So I'm using Mod Podge and I'm applying it with like a disposable sponge, and I'm taking pieces of tissue paper and sticking it to the outside. Now, I didn't really have a plan going into this. At first I was like, okay, I'll just like do it normal style. But as I was doing this tissue paper decoupage, it ended up looking, it was giving meat. It was giving like strips of lunch meat all layered on top of each other. And so I decided to make a meat suitcase. And because I've never done this before, there are certain things that I would have definitely done differently if I were to do this again, because I was sort of layering up the tissue paper to kind of give this texture of like leather, you know, like that sort of wrinkliness of leather with like that overlapping look to make it look like it's a bunch of pieces of meat, you know, person leather sewn together. And if I were to do this again, I probably would have like built up the layers more and like sort of delineated the sort of the seams in between the pieces a little bit more clearly, because once everything was painted, it ended up looking a lot more flat than I would have wanted. Once the decoupage was all done and dry, I mixed up a sort of fleshy color and I used that to base out the entire case. And I had to mix this color over and over again in multiple batches, and it ends up changing a lot by the end. Once I had the base color down, I went in with some dark brown paint to map out my little patches of skin. Once I had the patches all mapped out, the next order of business was to make this look even more fleshy. So I'm tearing apart this little sponge to get like a little texture stamper, and I'm wetting it, going in with some red paint, and I'm just applying that everywhere. And multiple things went into this. So at first I started just around where the little edges of the patches were, but then I decided it actually looked a little bit more like gross and like burst blood vessel-y to kind of cover the entire surface with this like lighter red stippling, you know, to really make it look, I was just trying to make it look nasty, y'all. And please forgive me for this absolutely chaotic filming angle. This is a very different project for me, and it was a little bit difficult to figure out how to film it. So I was holding the camera in one hand, blotting with the other. Just enjoy the ride, okay? So to make the lines separating the pieces of meat less harsh, I'm going over the edges of it with this darker red paint and just sort of like stippling that out to, you know, make it blend a little bit better. Once I was done with that, I used some black paint to make little stitches to really tie together the whole Frankenstein vibe of it all. And then at the ends of each stitch, I went in with some more red paint to create the point at which the thread enters the flesh. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick moment to say that if you watched this far and you liked this video, consider liking it. It really helps me out a lot. And if you want to see more things from me, consider subscribing. I have a lot of fun things planned. And if you have any thoughts, feelings, or onions, please leave those in the comments below. But only if you're nice to me. Please be nice to me. I cry very easily. And with that done, the last thing to do is to cover this whole thing with a very generous coat of Glossy Mod Podge to help preserve the paint job as well as give it that moist, fleshy, meat look that I'm going for, baby. And it's done. Here are the final results. I didn't know how to film the final result shot, so here's me holding it up. Here's my meat suitcase. I'm very proud of it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope to see y'all next time. Love you. Bye.